Thanks, everyone. And again, like everyone else, thanking COVID for doing Integrate again this year. Didn't expect quite as many people for EDI, but obviously there are some people interested in the EDI side of things. So my name is Bill Chesnut. I'm a cloud platform and API evangelist. That's the kind of title when your boss says, pick your title, you give yourself. So, okay, there's my details if you need to get a hold of me afterwards. I am lucky, it looks like I should be just about ready to retire when BizTalk goes out of support in 2030. So my BizTalk bill handle will work. So, how many people are using EDI right now with Logic Apps? So, that's good. And this is going to show you probably a little bit of an easier way to do it to keep from having to build as many workflows. So one of the things we'll talk about is I guess it's funny, when you talk to different people about EDI, you get different questions and different answers because electronic data interchange is wide open. But the EDI, these particular ones have been around for a long time. And the way I describe how long they've been around is that EDIFact and X12 came into existence when a 1200 baud modem was high speed. And for the younger ones, that's 1 bar on 4G. So they've been around for a long time. But the thing is, they're still being heavily used. I know in Australia, it's the 3 main grocery chains. If you want to sell them anything, you have to be able to supply EDI messages to them. Even to the point, I think there was one case where there was a greengrocer in a very remote West Australian town that had to have EDI to sell them vegetables into one of their stores. So for them, it was a bit of a challenge because it was mom and pops. And again, what happened because of that is you'll see that there is value-added networks. They'll they'll take your spreadsheet, turn it into an EDI message, send it to the provider, get it back, turn it back into a spreadsheet for you. Most of my work in Australia around EDI has been the larger companies that want to get away from the value-added networks. Because one of them was like, we want to change a field and it's $5,000. So that's why they're looking at. So we'll look at AS2, X12, and EDIFact. AS2 is the interesting one. It developed kind of about the same time as HTTPS. And if you think about it, it's a secure way to send data over HTTP. So, but again, because it developed at about the same time, it offers a little bit extra in terms of the message signing. But other than that, it's HTTPS with a notification. But depends on whether you're using the notifications or not. X12. So this is another one of those, the US and the rest of the world. X12 is US, Internet standards. And you can see from that little sample I've got there of the X12 that what they did is they reduced the amount of data that needed to be sent in each message by taking out spaces, taking out any fields that aren't used, just trying to basically reduce the size of the transmission. You can have both technical and functional acknowledgments in those. So the functional is I can understand the message. Technical, I can process the message. EDIFact is the rest of the world. It's United Nations. In Australia, we're caught in between both worlds because we have some suppliers that are international suppliers that want X12, and then the local suppliers want EDIFact. Again, same concept, get rid of the spaces, get rid of the data that you don't need to make the message smaller to transmit. So what I've come up with is a solution that allows you to control all of your messaging via configuration. So I've got a very generic set of logic apps to do things like, I want to send a message AS2. I want to send a message with X12. I want to send a message EDIFact, or I want to send X12 with AS2, or EDIFact with AS2. And one of my clients, when we started working on the project to move them away from their value-added network, also threw in another interesting one. They've got a couple of suppliers that just want a custom API call. It's a JSON payload that needs to be sent to an API endpoint. So I added that one into the mix to get a better idea of how flexible this can be. So on the receive, we're doing the same thing. AS2, maybe just X12, maybe just EDIFact, maybe AS2 with X12 or EDIFact. And the nice thing about most of those is that there's enough information embedded in the payload to find out everything you need, except, of course, the custom API. So we're looking at basically requiring the person that's sending us custom API to put some headers in the HTTP call. Actually, let me go back one slide. One of the other things that I've been able to do is to leverage how people send me a message to send and how they consume the received message. Because some customers want it dropped in a storage account, some of it want an API call, things like that. So this is a sample of the configuration that I've come up with. So for this particular one, I'm using an X12 AS2, and it's calling a workflow that I've built that's send X12 AS2. It's got all of the information in there that is, for my demos, we're partner 1, partner 2, just because it was easier. And then we need what the AS2 agreement looks like. How many people are familiar with all the agreements and things like that? Yeah, pretty much if you've done any of this, you have to kind of live and breathe those agreements. And then with the AS2, you have a AS2 from and to. Then what I've got is when a customer goes to send a message to a particular vendor, even though EDI is a standard and everybody's going to get like an X12 850 purchase order, there's not a standard. People can do all kinds of weird and wonderful things with fields. So what I've done is, you'll notice in that configuration is a liquid map. So I can take their inbound JSON they send me, map it to the XML I need for the X12 encoder. Then I have the URL they need it sent to with the optional of what method they're going to do and also any query parameters and header parameters. If you're familiar with AS2, you'll know that it actually supplies some of those. And then what I have is I've got a notification prefix. So I can send messages to a storage queue or into email if I need to, out of that notification. So if you look at that, you can see that that covers pretty much all of the information you need to do to send a message to somebody. Gives you who your partner is, what kind of mapping I need to do. I include the schema there just to do schema validation. I didn't have the schema there to start with, and the customers were building their own maps and they weren't producing valid XML. So we've done that. With the receive, it's a slight different because you don't have to do as much. That message is coming in. You might want to apply a map, because 90% of my clients, when I say XML, kind of duck and run because most people are so used to JSON and things like that. So we have a map, we have a notification queue, and then I've developed a concept because I built it initially for a single customer where we were dropping it into a storage account. But I've got a new customer I'm working with that they want it sent to an API. So I've built this delivery locations so that you can put in there what type it needs to be, where it needs to go, what the extension needs to be. And then that way it's completely tailorable. They can tell me exactly what what location in the storage account they want, or what API they want me to call, all of those kind of things to be able to do that configuration. And what I do is, let me just page back up just a second. The name of this configuration for the send is Partner 1, Partner 2, 850. So what they do is they call an API endpoint with Partner 2 as the trading partner and the document type. I go out and look this configuration up in Key Vault. How many people knew that Key Vault will store up to 25K worth of bytes? Yeah, so it's a real way, because the thing is that there could be, if you've got any kind of subscription keys or any kind of that kind of stuff that you need to have in there, it's good to have it in Key Vault. That way it's protected. Most of the stuff could be in app config, but I just picked Key Vault as an easy way to do all of it. And then on the way in, what you'll have is the same thing. Partner 1, Partner 2, and whatever the document type is. Either the 850 from X12, or say if it's an EDIFact order, you'd have order. But it's up to you really on how you want to put those configurations in there. So again, with the send, you basically have a trading partner and a document type. Now, if you're in a situation that I've just encountered recently, I had a company where they had two different home trading partners. So they were kind of being a little bit of a broker for a couple of companies. So in that case, I would add host partner to that header. So then it would have host partner, trading partner, and document type to look that configuration up with. And then just as a little bit of a different way of doing things, I also wired up Event Grid. So you see that send from storage account. So basically what it does, it gets the Event Grid message, loads up the file out of the storage account, and then calls the send with that. And what I do with the send from storage account is the folder that contains the file needs to be Partner 1, Partner 2, 850. So then it can derive the same information from what to do with that file. Then once it's in there, it then calls either a send AS2, because you can send a document just with AS2. You don't have to have X12 or EDIFact. You can do AS2. Then there's X12 by itself, X12 with AS2, EDIFact, and EDIFact with AS2. And again, you can make any combination of this. The whole idea is that configuration that I'm using behind the scenes to make it work. With the receive, basically it receives the message. If it's AS2, there'll be some headers included. There's 3 or 4 headers that are required for AS2. If you're doing custom APIs, I've also done, you need a header so it knows how to look up the configuration for that custom API. Then I have basically a receive X12 or a receive EDIFact. And then I have a separate one that implements those delivery locations. So you can put as many of those delivery locations in there. And that configuration is not hard and fast. If you decide you're going to do a custom API, you can enhance that JSON configuration to add whatever you wanted to. It's just you need to add that to the Logic app so it parses it and it's able to pull those fields that you need to do that. So let's go have a bit of a look. I know that's what everybody wanted. Nah. So let's go here. So what I have, and how is that? Does it need to be? So if we look, I'm using a Logic App Workspace. Is everybody familiar with a Logic App Workspace? It's basically, it's got functions and Logic Apps in the same. Because one of the things that I did is some stuff around Event Grid, parsing out the subject line so I know where to get all the pieces for pulling the file, and parsing out the payloads. So is it X12, is it EDIFact, things like that. And I ran into some issues that sometimes it would base 64 encode it, sometimes it wouldn't. It's a little bit, and if you've worked with Logic App much, you'll know that that base 64 stuff is the bane of most of your existence in there. But what I've got is, here's my send, and the only thing that I'm questioning is whether the designer will come up in a appropriate time. So we'll see how that goes. But basically, it's interesting. I will tell you one thing. When I was building all this, I spent almost a week trying to figure out why I couldn't get my AS2 to decrypt. It was a pair of curly braces in the wrong spot. Instead of having the decode go in as at trigger body, I had at curly braces trigger body. That broke the AS2 decoder. And you could look at it for an hour and not see it. I finally gave up, built a new little Logic app, and tried it, and then went and built it completely in the Visual Designer, and then went and compared the two of them. And that was the only way I found it. So basically what we've got is we got our HTTP receive here. It's got some the trading partner and the document type header. Then, and one thing that I did do is that in my consumption Logic app version of this, I used HTTP to get the key vault information, just because it was easier than the key vault connector. With the Logic Apps Standard, I'm using the key vault. Now, how many people have battled in their Logic Apps Standard with trying to test something locally with key vault and storage wanting the connection strings, but then when you deploy it, you want to use managed identity? I've got an interesting way I solve that. I maintain a connections.json and a connections.deploy. And what I do is when I do because I convert my biceps into ARM in a build step. And what I do at that point too is I delete connections.json and rename the connections.deploy to connections.json, and that has all of the managed identity pieces in it. I did talk to Wagner for a while on how to do it without doing that, and the only way was a parameter with a big chunk of JSON in it, and it just seemed too hard. So I went with the easier way. And then, so we get our configuration. It parses that configuration. Then we basically go in and decide which transport, let me just see if I can get this to go back over. No. No, it does not want to. We'll get rid of that. Okay, there we go. So then basically I switch on my transport type. So in top of that configuration file is the different transport types. And I do have a separate one for the custom API side of things. And with the custom API, I can have a API in my environment that does all the mapping and formatting, and then it calls a custom API on the trading partner side. So that'll cater for any kind of really weird connection protocols that they need to do, because you can build that custom API however you want to. And then basically, one thing I do have to do is that when I'm doing the AS2 side of things, I end up sending that from the workflow that's doing that. And then I also mark on the receive, I mark it that it's done that. So basically it goes through there, captures any errors. At the moment, I send back the AS2 MDM, but that's pretty much up to you. Whatever you want to send back to tell them that it's successfully sent, you can pretty much do in here. So let's go look at the receive. The consumption version of this, I went into the client, put it in, and basically did 2 of their trading partners, and now they're at 30 trading partners. They've been able to create the configuration, the maps, and all that kind of stuff for all of those other trading partners. Which from a person that they were partially a developer, but they were more used to working with the EDI side of things. So that's the good thing about it. So when you receive it, it basically, you grab all the headers. This is where I'm looking forward to the codeful workflows, because there's a bunch of little steps in here to grab variables that I think the codeful workflow will do a much better and much easier job of. What I really like about that is the fact that you'll have access to all those EDI connectors, because that's the hard part. If I want to do this in functions, getting those, I have to go buy somebody's library and then work through all of their stuff to do, where I'm used to doing it this way because I'm an old BizTalk guy. So basically, I parse all the headers, then I basically check if it's AS2. And the easiest way to check if it's AS2 is there has to be an AS2 from and an AS2 header in the headers that get called. So you just check for one of those and you'll know right away whether it's AS2 or not. And then basically you go look, I've looked up I've got an AS2 decoder. Let me just see if I can make this screen a little bit bigger. And then it also, in the AS2 decoder, it checks to see if they want an MDN and goes ahead and sends that. And this is where I actually mark it that I've sent a response. So if the AS2 MDN says it wants to be asynchronous, it puts it in the response and sends it back. If it's asynchronous, it sends it separately. Then I basically check for any errors on that, and then I go off and get the configuration. And then I parse the payload to see, okay, now I've got the payload out of my AS2. Is it an X12 payload? Is it an EDIFact payload? Is it something different? The 2 I've done at the moment are really just the X12 and the EDIFact, because it will be a little bit dependent on your clients when you want to implement the custom API stuff. But then it invokes those receives, and basically catches any errors that happen with that. And then it decides at the bottom if the response has not been sent, then you can send a different response at that point. So if it was a asynchronous MDN, you can do that. But the X12 receiver and the EDIFact receiver takes care of any of the technical acknowledgments or functional acknowledgments that need to be sent and sends those separately asynchronously. So let's go back to the slides. That's kind of a good overview of the code. And let's go back to the slides real quick. So the other thing I do is I publish the send workflow and the receive workflow through API management. So that way you can do anything you want to in terms of what you can do in API management. You can require an OAuth token, you can do IP restrictions, you can do all that kind of. And if you've got API management above the consumption level, you've got a static IP address for your trading partner to list, because you can't get that out of a Logic app. So you've got those. My send Logic app, I usually have a API management subscription key with also, because technically send should only be called from internally. Where the receive, I don't have a subscription key on, because pretty much anybody can send that. Getting some trading partners to add a subscription key to their AS2 headers was a challenge. So we basically opted for that. And you can enforce that a little bit more. If you know everything's coming in with AS2, you can actually, in the AS2 configuration, you can tell it, if it's not encrypted, to reject it. So you got some control over how well you get things in there. Now, and the exposing the Logic apps, both of the Logic apps into API management is thanks to Andrew from, he was at Black Marble at that time. I think he's moved on. Huh? Black Marble. His blog post on being able to pull the values out of the Logic app and publish them. So I need to chase down the API management guys and find out when they're going to do it. But they haven't done it yet. Okay. So when I go between the API management and Logic app, you can also enforce so that you cannot call your Logic app directly from the internet, because you can put IP restrictions on there. The other thing you can do, and I've done, is you can use the managed identity of API management to be required to call your Logic app. The only thing you've got to do if you're going to do that is you've got to remove the signature off the Logic app call URL, because it can't handle a OAuth, a bearer token, and the signature in the same call. So you just, and I've got, those are all in policies inside of the API management, so you can just edit the policy to do that. The most recent client I've done a lot of work with, everything's inside of a VNet. So most of it I didn't have to worry about because it's inside of a VNet. If anybody's trying to put API management inside of a VNet in internal mode and trying to use Logic App managed connectors, come see me, I'll give you the trick, because otherwise it will not work. And I spent almost the whole week I was at Integrate last year trying to fix that remotely. Okay, so let's, a little bit more about the demo setup that I'm going to go through is basically I chose very creative names for the partners, partner 1 and partner 2. I did deploy those into different Azure regions. How many people know why I did that? Any guesses? integration accounts. You get a free one in each region. So I didn't have to buy an integration account as long as I put one partner in one region and the other partner in another region. And don't get me started on integration accounts. But basically, I've got it all deployed completely with DevOps, and it deploys the infrastructure separately, the configuration for each partner separately, and the code separately. And we'll look at that in a couple minutes. Let's go actually run a bit of code. So, another quick question. How many people have used the REST extension for VS Code? Yes, it's a wonderful little thing because it allows me to put a lot of my testing stuff inside of my Visual Studio project. So let me go here. So the first one we're going to try is the pure AS2. I'm just sending partner 1 to partner 2, or partner 2 to partner 1, and just sending a JSON file. So we go and we hit send request. Usually takes a couple of minutes for that to fire completely up. But this is the one thing that a lot of people have struggled with when they're building Logic Apps, EDI stuff, is trying to get a test environment set up that actually is properly encrypting data and things like that. I did come up with a way to, in a bicep template and some PowerShell, create and deploy the certificates. So I'm using Key Vault self-signed certificates and able to deploy those into the integration account. So what you see here, the response back is it's got a status of processed, and it's basically my pure AS2 one. If we go and look at the Logic app for partner 1, we should see the receive workflow. And I still haven't got over the fact that it opens up in Designer now instead of run history. So, and that time is Melbourne, Australia time on my laptop, so that's why it says it's 9:45 in the evening. So let's look here. So we got our HTTP receive, and basically we've got our header. I left the workflow headers in there. Normally I will take the workflow headers out. But one thing I am doing in the code is I am, inside of API management, I'm creating an X correlation ID. I've got some code in a global policy, and then I pass that X correlation ID through all of my workflows so that way my logging, I can tie stuff together with the logs. So we'll see we've got our AS2 to and from, so we know it's an AS2 message. And then we've got our base64 encoded content. And then it basically looks up all the configuration, basically decides that it's got a AS2 header, goes into here, does the AS2 decode. And the nice thing about all of these is they basically give you the information you need to look up like that configuration, because you've got the from partner, the to partner in there. And then you've got the outgoing MDM that it's created so you can send that if you need to. In this case, I'm not doing anything else with it because it was just a AS2 payload. Actually, we could do that real quick. And this is your friend if you're working with Logic Apps much. What's that?
There's a decoder extension for the
Oh, there is. I didn't pick up the right. Oh, I didn't pick up enough of it. Let's go here and actually that's not what I want. Sorry, I want the output. And if you wanted to know, that's what an AS2 message looks like in binary. Decode. Oh, I grabbed the wrong thing again. Okay, demos. That's the MDM that was sending back. So where's the content? Oh, because it was just simple content, there it is in escaped JSON at the top. It wasn't very much there, so it's just escaped up there. That was another challenge that I found, that sometimes the message content is got the message type in the content, and some of it's just the content. So you have to do a little bit of messing around looking at that. And again, I will show you that one thing I was talking about in my earlier is that AS2 decoder code view. See where that at trigger body? I had an extra curly brace in there, so that caused it to break. If you had I had curly brace there and a curly brace at the end, and it basically would not decode. It was throwing an error about that. So that's basically the receive. We can also then go into our partner 2 and look at the send. And hopefully in the next 2 weeks, I'll have this up on my GitHub site too, so you'll have all this code to go out and have a look at. So the send. Came in, got the headers, went off and got the configuration. So if we look at actually run history, not designer. Git config, and it brings back actually, it's easier to look at in here, but you'll see transport AS2, the agreement name, and the endpoint and things like that. So, and then it basically uses that to call the AS2 send. So pretty straightforward on that. Let's hop back to the slides before I run out of time. So all of my DevOps stuff is YAML files. I was a diehard Azure DevOps release pipeline person before this. I have converted all these to be just YAML pipelines. But I've got the infrastructure. Now, I use, in this particular case, I used app config. How many people are familiar with Azure app configuration? So what I did is when I deploy the infrastructure, all of that infrastructure, the name of my API management, all of that kind of stuff is stored in app config. And then when I need to deploy anything later, I just go to app config for the environment and basically pulls that into the Azure pipeline as variables. And then I can use those to deploy everything I need to deploy. Now, so the shared deployment here is the app configuration. And then I have the Azure deployment that does partner 1 and partner 2. You just basically, if you were doing this without the full test, you just have your partner 1 or whatever your local partner is. Like I said, I had the automated stuff for the certificates working, but I was having so much trouble with the curly braces in the wrong spot. I took it out and did some stuff by hand. I haven't had a chance to put it back in there. I do convert my bicep templates to ARM templates before I deploy them, because I like the way the parameters work on the ARM templates better than I do with the bicep templates. It's just something that I've had a habit. So, because I can put them all in there. With my configuration, I have a shared configuration that I deploy the schemas with, because I need the same schemas in both my trading partners, because I have to be able to validate them on either side. And then I have a separate directory for partner 1 and partner 2 that has the agreements and all that kind of stuff. And those are all in Bicep. The schemas I am deploying with PowerShell. I don't know if anybody else ran into it, but when you tried to bring them into the Bicep as a text file or a JSON file, they worked about half the time. And I couldn't explain it. So my maps and my schemas are deployed with PowerShell. And then the actual code is deployed in the last, and that basically does the code into the Logic Apps Standard, and it does the publishing of the endpoints into API management. One caveat to think about is that about every third or fourth time I deploy code and I try to put them into API management, it fails, because it takes the Logic app too long to restart after I've deployed the code. When the Bicep tries to go pull, or the endpoint for the Logic app that it wants to publish, it fails. So I've just got to restart count 2 on that particular Bicep step. So, okay, let's go. I've got 5 minutes. Let's go look at this real quick. So here are all my pipelines. So I have code, configuration partner 1, configuration partner 2, infrastructure, and the schemas. And basically, if we look at like the configuration, it's basically deploying to partner 1, and then if we look at the code deploys, does the build, and then partner 1, partner 2. And that's the interesting thing, is that I'm using the exact same code for both ends of the connection. So it's built in such a way that it's all driven by configuration. Let's see what else. We can have a look at the. Let's look at the build. YAML, where's my Logic Apps? Let's look at the. Oh, yes, the. Just going to pull up the. So the YAML that I use for the build on my Logic Apps, I basically do the Bicep file first for it. Then I do a build on the function part of the workspace. And then I took that function ignore file, get file, out of what the designer creates and input it into there so that it can throw away as much of the stuff that you don't need when you deploy. I wish there was an easier way, and I wish there was a way, when you hit debug inside of Visual Studio Code to run your Logic app, it does some sort of build against that Logic app, because it'll tell you if you've got variables missing or things like that. I wish you could do that in this pipeline. because the number of times I've deployed things and they've been broken and that. So basically I just put all of that in there, build the zip file, and then that's what I do for my builds and all of them, because I convert the bicep to JSON. That's pretty much what I've done in there. Let's go on to that. So the workspaces made it a bit easier to code, because when you get those situations where you need to do a bunch of fiddly stuff like break up the subject line of the event grid message, because I needed to have all of the separate pieces, being able to write a small function makes that a lot easier. The workspaces, that's why I'm really looking forward to this codeful stuff, that I can do all of that in the one thing and not have to do a function. For the EDI stuff, I find that the Logic Apps really helps my customers, because they can go in when one of them fails, they can go in and see what failed. Because I've had one that the trading partner decided to send a bunch of test messages, so they saw all these failures, and they had the wrong trading partner ID in the test messages. So they couldn't find the configuration, so it failed. So it was just easier than digging through, especially with functions and the logs and stuff like that. It was easier just to go look at them. So, any questions? Yes?
You tease that right now. How does your platform report errors, and how does the workflow for your operators look like in identifying and discovering errors and handling them?
So each one of those Logic Apps, when it does like the decode blocks, there is an error block there that I don't think there's anything in there. What I've done for a lot of customers is put Teams messages in there that tells them what workflow has failed, gives them the workflow ID so they can go back to that exact workflow and see where it's failed. And the inbound stuff, you can just restart, because it's an HTTP payload. You can restart it, and most receivers won't complain about a second MDN because they already marked it. So
you're basically using Logic Apps run history and custom notifications in some cases.
yes,
Have you hit the problem with only 50 retries or reruns of a Logic Apps within 5 minutes hit limit?
no, I haven't.
There is one.
Yeah. There's always something out there just waiting to bite you, yes. But most of the time, it's that I've seen the failures, it's been configuration issues that you need to go fix the configuration, or like lately I got one that the agreements for X12 said not to use the repetition character, but the trading partner insisted on sending it, and it was a U, and it got rid of every U in the payload. So it was things like, it's been a configuration. We've seen a few timeouts on one of my customers when they're trying to send to the trading partner with AS2. They've had some timeouts on their side. And basically we just went in there and we implemented some retries in the Logic app for that. So, but most of it, we've been using the Teams message, or we've been using the notification services in Azure to send an email. But one of the things I always put in all of the messages is the run ID, so that you can go to the top if you've got thousands of the things there. You can paste the run ID, hit enter, and it'll take you to that run. So, any other questions? Thank you very much.